you earlier about the conversation regarding the promises that were made ahead of the 2016 general elections. I've been joined by three men whose voices you very well know in this. Joshua Makubu is a person with a disability advocate. Joshua, good to see you again. Jalil Odum is with Inclusion Ghana. Jalil, thank you very much. And our own brother, Abdul Wahab, is with the Federation. Abdul, thank you very much for your time. So let's take stock of what promises were made to persons with disability in the 2016 manifesto, first of all, and then we can track, do an analysis. You want to start with me, Josh? You won't start.
Very good morning to your listeners, especially my brothers and sisters from the OT Enclave, which has been going for a referendum.
Now pushing OT agenda too.
Yes.
Charlie.
The NPP manifesto adopted some of the points the disability movement compiled ahead of the elections. And among them was the appointment of a substantive executive secretary to a National Council on Persons with Disability, decentralization of the offices of the National Council on Persons with Disability to the regional and to the district level, and then the increase of the Disability Common Fund from 2% to 3%. It was actually increased but not implemented by the NDC government. Okay. The NPP promised what they're implementing it. Okay. Then they also talk about maybe granting free education to persons with disability, ensuring that that particular provision, which is in the Persons with Disability Act of Ghana, Act 715, was fully implemented. So these were some of the things that we engage ourselves on ahead of the elections.
Jalil, let's look at implementation now. These were promises that were made. I'm sure there are a lot more that we could think about. Inclusion was a big issue as well. What do you see? Are the promises being fulfilled?
I wouldn't say that it's fully being implemented. However, I would say that there are some steps that are being taken. For instance, they also promised about an inclusive education for all. And obviously, I think that as part of the process, we now have a policy. Okay. There is some steps being taken to implement that policy, I would say. Obviously, one big thing is employment. Okay. Because when people get educated, I mean, people with disabilities get educated and they need jobs. They must have it. I mean, and it must be equity.
I thought what we're told that persons with disability would have the toll booths to themselves, so to get some employment.
Well, toll booths. I mean, we want formal jobs. Okay. I think that's the whole point. I'm not saying that toll booths, is.
But where you are qualified, you want to have your job.
Absolutely. Right. And I think that we want to move away from the charity model that is being used to a more right-based model. So if we qualify for a particular job, we must have it.
Right.
We don't want so toll booths. Let's put them there because that's where they belong. I think that we want to move away from that.
Abdul, you scoffed a bit when I talked about the toll booths. You have a red flag to raise?
No, just that what I was thinking has been said by my colleague. Because it's just like people thinking is that once toll booth has been reserved for some persons with disability, all persons with disability, no matter the qualification, would have to work on toll booth. And sometimes when you are even talking about employment, you hear people say that, but toll booth is there for you, irrespective of even your qualification. People have that thinking. So that's why it's like when he was mentioning it, I was a kind of
health and education for us here, and this conversation is made possible by our missions project sponsored by Star Ghana, European Union, UK, and Danita. Now, Abdul, health is critical. Within the past 22 months, the promises that were made to persons with disability, have you seen that promise within the health and education sector fulfilled?
So far, for health as it is, I must say that we have not seen much of the promises being fulfilled, because most of our health facilities remain inaccessible to persons with disabilities. And beside that, sign language is one of the key areas that we have to look at as health providers or as a country. So what we have to be asking ourselves is how many deaf people are able to access health fully, because we do not have sign language interpreters in all the health centers, though we have information that Ministry of Health has started training some nurses or included sign language in their curricula. We are yet to see the full light of it. But for education, I think we have to appreciate the fact that government has done something, because the inclusive education policy my colleague spoke about earlier is one of the areas that we should be looking at, and of course say something to commend government for that step that has been taken. Yes, we have the policy in place, and then implementation actions and other process has taken place to ensure effective implementation of the policy.
Joshua, so now these are the conversations thus far. Moving on, what do you hope to see? I know you're a PhD candidate and all of that. So when we talk about employment, you of course are looking at getting the bigger ones, not restricting yourself to a toll booth office in some corner. But the 3%, which is supposed to be allocated to persons with disability within the communities, is it helpful? Is it helping? Are you seeing it?
Thank you very much. The 3% from common fund is a huge sum of money, but the manner in which it is being dispersed is very appalling.
How?
Yeah. You go to a district, and then a person with disability who wants to set up something economical, then he applies for this fund, and a certain social welfare officer and a certain assemblyman calling him chairman of a social something committee. You go and give that person 1,000 Ghana cedis, 500 Ghana cedis. It's an indirect way of saying that you to take this one and go your way.
How much do you expect them to get?
No, I expected that, as the vice president intimated some time ago, these people should have been made to come out with what? Good business proposals, which will be evaluated, and then other assessments made. Absolutely. And even if the person needs 10,000 Ghana cedis, the person is given and monitored and supervised to be able to implement it. Then that person is off, what do you call it? The list. Then when the next batch of common fund comes, then we tackle that. But putting all of them together and giving them arms, just as Mr. Jalil was saying, we are still behaving as if persons with disability are up in arms, what? Begging. I know somebody who applied for just about 3,500. And that person was told that money is too big.
3,500.
And the person was told that money is too big. Then I asked myself, for instance, I am a student, a PhD student. I have my thesis to do. I need an advanced laptop and other things. I can't go and take 1,000 cedis or 2,000 cedis. For what? It wouldn't help in any way. So if indeed the 3% of the common fund has come and we mean business, I think government should take steps, and then some form of orientation should be provided to district coordinating directors, the district chief executive, the social welfare officers, and even those people who are serving on the committee, to let them know that, no, we need to do things.
So the conversation, the 3%, it does look like it's come to stay, but we have hiccups how to disperse the funds. What is the conversation? What kind of conversation are we having with the duty bearers? That, look, you set this up for us from 2% to 3%, and we're still not feeling it.
I think it's issues of misunderstanding of, how to apply, to how to put the money in good use. And so the ignorance of the beneficiaries are taken advantage of. So you have duty bearers who can even think that, okay, I'm giving you 1,000 cedis.
I'm doing
you a favor.
Okay.
Look, I'm going to give you 1,000 cedis, but you got to return 200 cedis to me. You know, that kind of. So it's kind of charity kind of conversations all the time. Now you have a situation where there is a guidelines which must be strictly followed, and here we are. I mean, committee, disbursement committee just decides anyhow they're going to disburse it, and there's no monitoring whatsoever. I mean, of course, we are not saying that this is the same everywhere.
Right.
There are some districts that are doing very great
well.
job,
Okay.
and we need to commend them. But then you still feel that, I mean, the whole ideology around disability is that, oh, let's
give them handouts.
Let's give them handouts.
Abdul, where do we go from here? Your closing thoughts. Where do we go from here? You are a spokesperson for the Federation of Disability Organizations.
Yeah. I think based on the issues around the common fund, what I think we have to do is to ensure that we review the guidelines, so that the guidelines will meet a certain standard. That will make provisions for how people should access and use the common fund. Because it looks like persons with disability themselves, as my colleague rightly said, still have some basic ignorance about how they apply the funds. There have been situations where persons with disability apply for certain tools, and at the end of the day, the tools are being purchased, and they come around to say that, no, I didn't request for that, I requested for this, and it becomes a problem. So I believe when we review the guidelines and even try to do a lot of education and sensitization around it, and people get to understand it, and we all apply it, it will change the life of persons with disability. Because 3% of the common fund is not a small money.
It's not
when
small
we
money.
use it well, it can change the situation.
Joshua, your closing thoughts. Inclusion, for me, it's critical, because I think that we only pay lip service to it. We have not included our people yet. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I was very happy when the finance minister said this budget is one of the budget that has taken care of the provisions under the sustainable development goals. And when it comes to sustainable development goals, it's all about inclusion, leaving no one behind.
That will be the second after Mexico, and the first in Africa.
So I expect that as we launch into operation, this budget will see a transformation right from the presidency, where persons with disability can walk in there free without any problem. We can go to school, mingle with other people.
Do you see the hope coming?
That is what I'm made to believe. So I'm just hoping that the finance minister is telling me something that I can rely on. Yeah.
Mr. Jalil, I wrap up with you on this conversation. Your closing thoughts.
Look, I think that inclusion is everything. Now, you're talking about inclusive transport system. You're talking about inclusive housing. Now, look at all the buildings that government is putting up, whether for residential or for offices. There's no inclusion at all.
Well, I think that the Ministry of Gender, Social and Social Protection doesn't have inclusive infrastructure for persons with disability.
Yeah.
Yes, there are no lifts.
Yeah.
There's no lift, there are no ramps, nothing.
Yeah.
The ministry. Okay.
No, and I think that we need to begin to take steps on this. And the whole inclusion idea is that wherever or whatever we are doing as a country, anytime we are thinking about it, let's think about how can people with disability access the same thing as ordinary people.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jalil Odum, the voice you just heard, is with Inclusion Ghana. Joshua Makubu is a persons with disability advocate, and Abdul Wahab is with the Federation of Disability Organizations. Actually, their spokesperson. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Most grateful. And we want to say thank you to Strengthening Transparency, Accountability and Responsiveness, what we call STAR Ghana, to the European Union, to DFID and to UK Aid for making this conversation possible.